Sterling Short Stories. Step into the story.
The haunting truth of Greyfield Asylum. The first time I saw her, she was sitting on the edge of my bed. A pale, mysterious girl with hair like wisps of smoke and eyes that seemed to hold every secret the night had ever kept. I knew I was the only one who could see her. Here in Greyfield Asylum, everyone had their own ghosts. Mine just happened to be more literal. She didn't speak, not at first. She just watched me, her head tilting slightly like she was trying to puzzle me out. I had to stifle a scream when I first saw her, not because I was afraid of ghosts, but because I'd learned not to give the nurses more reason to bring the restraints. But as the days passed, her silent visits began to feel less ominous and more familiar, like she was waiting for me to understand something. Greyfield was a grim place. The walls were painted in faded beige. The air smelled faintly of bleach and decay, and the cries of other patients echoed through the halls at all hours. But none of that mattered when she was with me. She became my tether, my confidant. I started calling her Elise, though I had no idea if that was her name. It just felt right. Elise began guiding me. She'd appear by the window, pointing at the storm outside, or stand by the door as if urging me to follow her. At first, I dismissed her gestures as meaningless. But one night, when the thunder cracked like a whip, I felt an overwhelming need to obey. She led me to the nurse's station, where a key ring dangled from a hook. No one was around. A rare and precious moment of negligence. My heart pounded as I grabbed the keys. The next thing I knew, I was running through the rain-soaked grounds, Elise flitting ahead like a shadow on the wind. She led me to an old maintenance shed, far from the main building. Inside, I found a trapdoor, its hinges rusted, but still functional. "What's down there?" I whispered. But Elise only motioned for me to go. I descended into the darkness, the musty air clinging to my skin. The basement was a labyrinth of forgotten rooms and tunnels. It felt untouched, like the asylum's dirty little secret. I found old files, dusty medical instruments, and a locked cabinet. Elise hovered near it, her gaze insistent. Using the stolen keys, I unlocked it to find photographs. They were old, but clear enough to recognize faces, patients, nurses, and doctors. And me. The photo of me wasn't from my recent stay. It was black and white, my face slightly younger but unmistakable. I wore a doctor's coat. My name was scrawled on the back, Dr. Victor Hale. My hands shook as I rifled through the other files. Patient records, all detailing experiments, psychological manipulations, drug trials, and worse. I had been one of Greyfield's lead researchers. Memories began to surface, slow and jagged like shards of glass. I remembered conducting interviews, injecting serums, watching patients scream and beg. And Elise wasn't a ghost. She was a patient, my patient. I'd overseen her treatments until one day she vanished. Her disappearance had been the first crack in my carefully controlled world. I stumbled back, my breaths coming in ragged gasps. "Elise," I croaked, "what did I do to you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer. Her eyes glowed red. And they were no longer saddened, but now they were furious. She raised a hand, and suddenly I was no longer in the basement. I was in a sterile room, strapped to a gurney, bright lights blinding me. "He's relapsing," a voice said. "Increase the dosage." I blinked, trying to make sense of my surroundings. A doctor loomed over me, syringe in hand. "Dr. Hale," he said, his tone clinical. "You've been making progress, but it seems you're still fixated on your delusions." "Delusions?" I rasped. "Yes, this obsession with a patient named Elise. You've constructed an entire narrative around her." The pieces clicked into place, each more horrifying than the last. I hadn't escaped Greyfield. I'd never been a patient, not in the way I thought. Elise wasn't haunting me. She was trying to make me remember. As the syringe plunged into my arm, as I jolted and tried to wiggle out my restraints, I saw her one last time. She wasn't angry anymore. She was smiling, and it was filled with deep sorrow and triumph. I called to her. "Elise, I'm sorry. I must pay for what I've done. I'm a monster." She just stared. Her brow lowered, and she said in a menacing voice, "I'll see you soon, Doctor." And then the darkness came. But ironically, I was no longer the doctor, but the afflicted, forever trapped in the corridors of his own madness. And that is right where I belong. Please like and subscribe for more sterling short stories on YouTube, but only if you dare.